Everybody, this is Stephen Howson, and I was about to do a Euros preview, and I thought, do you know what, no, we need to talk MMA, because the craziest 48 hours we've just had in the mixed martial arts world, and we don't normally get stuff like this. We normally get one big event, one big bit of breaking news, and it's kind of spread out throughout the week. It's hard finding good breaking news content. Obviously, I don't know, if all of you don't know, then I am the founder of mixed martial arts website, MMAlatestnews.com. It's the biggest it's the biggest MMA website in the UK. We're probably in the top 10 in terms of world mixed martial arts websites, probably around 8th or 9th in terms of size and numbers and what we do in this, that and the other. And that's what I do, as well as doing full-time devil stuff and that. So I don't talk much about mixed martial arts on Twitter, because it seems like most of my following, the vast majority of my following, are just United. So I generally just don't really talk much about it on Twitter. I stick to it. I talk about it a bit more on Facebook and stuff like that. We've had in MMA in the last 48 hours what I would say is like the final days of a transfer window in terms of news. And it's not just like mad rumours, it's actual things happening. It's been absolutely chaos. We can't get the news out fast enough. There's so much happening, there's so much to talk about. And I know that there's a few of you who have asked me to do more MMA content on this channel. And I've said no in the past, because my focus has been to get MMA content on MMA Latest. The YouTube channel we're on there, we're around about 10,000 subscribers. I'm trying to grow that. It's really difficult. The difference in covering MMA to covering football is that there's no teams in MMA. And you don't pass on your support of a fighter the way you would of a team. Maybe certain nations do. So I think the Irish nation take Conor McGregor to heart in the way that they might, take a football team to heart. And some of the other Irish fighters and stuff like that. And the Brazilians seem to do that quite a bit with their fighters. And there's a few nations that sort of follow around their fighters and things like that. But generally, it's difficult to find a partisan support, if you like, for a fighter. So the sort of stuff that would get hits by talking about in terms of football, the sort of things that would bang by doing it in football, you just don't know it. It's a lot more level with MMA. Big news is still big news, but people don't react to it in the same way that they do in football. And while it's relatively easy to get subscribers, or I found it relatively easy to get subscribers on this, and obviously Full-Time Devils is over 250,000 subscribers just focusing on just one football team. The world of MMA, some of the biggest networks out there are still struggling for big subscribers. The Underground, my friend Jonathan Schrager's one of the big people that does the stuff on the Underground. You'll have also seen him on Straight News as well, so he's in the same sort of sphere. The Underground's one of the most established, if not the most established, mixed martial arts website in the world. And it's got, I think, about 11,000 subscribers. It's really difficult because the culture's not there for people to watch on YouTube. I think it will get there eventually, but at the moment, it just isn't there. One of the ones that's got it is MMA Fighting on SBN. And that is MMA Fighting. And that is Ariel Helwani. And that is because Helwani is the best in the business in terms of video reporting from MMA events, predominantly UFC events. Ariel Helwani is the top of the mountain. Over the past weekend, some stuff's come out, and yesterday Ariel he does a show on a Monday called the MMA Hour, and it's called the MMA Hour, but it's about 4 hours long typically, and he usually has literally a who's who of MMA joining in via Skype to talk about all sorts of stuff, and it's a fantastic show. Most other outlets, including our own, will watch this to pull dozens of quotes out that will last us the rest of the week from what comes out of this show. Fantastic show, and Ariel seems like the nicest of guys. There's been some back and forth between some of the senior writers of our site and Ariel, because he's that good of a guy. He will talk to us. We're still amateurs and still new in this game, and he will talk to us and he will encourage us and he will give us advice and stuff like that, and he's always got time for everyone. So when this happened with Ariel at the weekend, and if you don't know what happened and you're an MMA fan, you really need to go and find out. And I appreciate a lot of you are football fans, so I have no idea what's happened. Ariel broke some news, right? And this is no different to a football reporter breaking a bit of transfer news and stuff like that. He broke a little bit of news about 20-30 minutes before the UFC was able to break it. And the UFC Brass came and met him prior to the main event, Michael Bisping against Luke Rockhold, and they removed him from the building. They removed his credentials, told him they was going to ban him for life and do everything that they could to ruin his career as an MMA journalist. That's wrong. That is just, it's wrong. They were telling him, it wasn't professional courtesy and this, that and the other, and Ariel defended it. He was like, no, I've got the sources, this is breaking news. No, this is what happens. This is how news works. We promote everything that leads to pay-per-view buys for you guys. You can't see your ass when we're breaking news because we've got jobs to do as well. And that culminated in yesterday's MMA hour. He had no guests on it this time. It was just him. It was him talking, just the camera. It was a very emotional 2 hours he spoke for, explained a little bit of background to some of the things that had happened between him and the UFC over the past few years, because there'd been a couple of fallouts and a couple of things like that. And he explained in detail what happened at weekend at UFC 199. About 25,000 people watched this live broadcast yesterday, which I think is probably record-breaking for the MMA hour. It does good numbers, but I think most people, like myself, typically listen to it on a download on iTunes afterwards, or they watch the cut-up little segments, like each 6-7 minute segment that they cut up after the event, where it talks to specific fighters. One fighter will come on, they'll just chop that bit out of the whole 4-hour podcast. So since that happened yesterday, obviously the whole MMA world started reporting on what he'd said and was in a little bit of shock at some of the things that had come out of it. Yesterday, Dana said he can come to UFC 200, but he has to buy a ticket. Typical Dana White sort of bullishness, like to be expected in all honesty. And then I woke up this morning to two bits of news. The first bit of news I'll get onto in a second, but the other bit of news was that Helwani had been reinstated. Now the first thing that I saw was a statement which said MMA fighting had been reinstated, because it wasn't just Helwani that got kicked out. The videographer and photographer that he was with also got kicked out. So they've reinstated MMA fighting. I was like, they haven't mentioned Helwani by name here at all. But then I saw a video interview with Helwani where he was talking about the next bit of news I'm going to talk about. And he said he'd been told he was okay. So this one's all under the carpet now. It's back. Helwani's the best in the business. We all look up to Helwani, and hopefully this is going to improve everybody's relationship with the UFC at the moment. We can but hope. The next bit of news that I was going to get onto, the shocking news that we woke up to this morning, that Kimbo Slice has passed away, age 42. Still not 100% sure what he's passed away from. A quick look suggested that he was hospitalised late last night in terms of UK time, so at some point yesterday. He was hospitalised and he's passed away in hospital. Sad news. And I mentioned on Twitter this morning that I was going to have lunch with him tomorrow. And I'm seeing my Twitter feed here actually, because I've got TweetDeck open behind him. People calling it bullshit. But it's not bullshit. I am actually still going to the lunch tomorrow. The lunch is a Bellator Fighter and Media Day thing. Kimbo was the main one that was going to be there. His son was going to be there. I imagine his son's definitely not going to be there now. I can't imagine any reasons why he would be there now. Michael Venom Page and Scott Coker, who is the president of Bellator. So, as far as I'm aware, the meal is still on. That's not changed as far as I'm aware. This was all just to promote the fight coming up in July in London next month, which Kimbo was the headline of. Which is, people have got mixed feelings on that. Kimbo is more of a circus style of fighter. He's not the best fighter in the world. His record of 5-2 proves that. He came into MMA very late in life, shot to fame. Oh man, it must have been 2003, 2004. It's probably pre-YouTube. Shot to fame, backyard brawling. Supposedly the most super nice guy in the world. Sad news that he's passed away. And I'm sure there's probably going to be more stuff come out of that as well. So condolences to the Ferguson family. Kevin Ferguson, obviously his real name, is not actually called Kimbo Slice. And me and MMA Jim on Twitter, MMA_Jim, Jim Edwards, probably the UK's leading mixed martial arts journalist. We was covering this event for tomorrow for MMA Latest. And Jim actually messaged me last night as we was talking about what our plans was. And he said, I'd be very surprised if Kimbo actually turns up. I don't think he meant in this sort of circumstance, but kind of spooky as I was reading back through our messages this morning. The next bit of news, and this is where it starts getting really good. This is what we should have been leading with. These two bits of news are sad bits of news that I didn't really want to have to talk about. Don't want to hear about fighters dying, and you certainly don't want to hear about members of the media being banned. The next three items are what we should be talking about. Now, the first one, I'll start on the first one, and this is what Helwani was ejected from the UFC for on Saturday night, and this is that Brock Lesnar is going to be fighting at UFC 200. And that's a comeback, that's a shock, that's a really big bit of news, and I can see why the UFC was upset about it, because I can imagine that they had this whole reveal planned around it. Well, sometimes best laid plans don't happen, do they? And there's no need to try and ruin a guy's life on the back of him finding out this news. You should have kept it a bit quieter from all the different other people who had that leak. So Brock Lesnar's going to be back at UFC 200. That is a big name, and I think this is probably because Conor is not at UFC 200. They need a massive name to sell it, and they've got it in Brock Lesnar. Now, Brock Lesnar, people say, oh, he's a WWE fighter. He's not a real fighter. Brock Lesnar was like 105 for 6 or 106 for 5 or something like that in his collegiate wrestling days. Brock Lesnar is a freak of nature. And I think if he'd have stayed in the UFC rather than screwing off back to WWE, maybe taken a slower, more long-term approach to it, I think he still could have been in the UFC and probably UFC champion, because he's just that much of a freak athlete. His wrestling is fantastic. He's probably second to none at heavyweight in the UFC. Now, he might have some problems with people with jiu-jitsu. Verdun might be a tough matchup for him. His striking is nowhere near elite level, but he's that big and powerful and that much of a gorilla that he can overcome it. His physical attributes can overcome elite striking at times. Now, obviously, we saw what Overeem did to him. That's Overeem. Overeem is another freak of nature, and some pharmaceutical experiments pre the extensive testing that now happens in the UFC. And the best thing that they could do, I was talking to Jim about this, Jim Edwards, on Sunday morning when it broke, and the first person that came into my head was Mark Hunt. And I said, Mark Hunt is a fun fight. It doesn't affect the rankings. And Mark Hunt last week, if you do watch MMA latest and you watch the weigh-in show, the week before last I did a show covering Mark Hunt's comments that said he's been told to stay active. He wanted to fight at UFC Madison Square Garden 202, and he was told to stay active. So when that came into my head and the Brock thing came into my head, I thought, do you know what? It's Mark Hunt. It's got to be Mark Hunt. What an unbelievable matchup that is. Mark Hunt, former K1 champion, former Pride fighter, unbelievably good hands. He is the king of the walkaway KO. One punch, boom, over and out. This is an intriguing fight because it can either stay on the feet or it's going to go to the ground. If you're Brock Lesnar, you're trying to take this to the ground because you cannot stand with Mark Hunt. That's just a fact. You can't stand with Mark Hunt. His hands are far too good. He's far too quick, far too accurate, and far too fucking good for you to stand with him. So, Brock Lesnar, can you take him to the ground? And if you can't, it's going out. And this is what makes it an intriguing fight. Styles make fights. You get two wrestlers against each other, they both try and stand and bang, and it ends up being rubbish. You get two jiu-jitsu guys, and they both think they're the Karate Kid. You get Brock Lesnar against Mark Hunt, and I think this makes sense for everybody at the UFC, because what you're going to get is you're going to get Brock trying to take Mark Hunt down. Could get caught on the way in. He might try even throwing a big overhand as he dummies for a takedown. It's an intriguing fight, it's a fun fight, and it's a perfect fight to go on UFC 200. Like I said, doesn't affect the rankings. No one's looking at being the champion off the back of this. Although if Mark Hunt wins, then he's probably going to be given the next shot at the title, I would have thought. A fun fight. And that's what we should have been leading with this morning. Or this bit of news that we should have been leading with. Mancunian-ish. He's from Clitheroe, but he's a United fan. Michael Bisping has become the UK's first UFC champion. That should be enormous news. That should have been on the back page of all of the papers, but it wasn't. It wasn't, because UK still hasn't picked up MMA to the level it should, and I'm hoping Michael Bisping's win now is the catalyst for this to happen. And I've got to admit, I didn't give Bisping a chance. I thought Luke Rockhold was going to do exactly what he did to him. I thought Rockhold's too confident, too good with the striking. And Bisping isn't known for his knockout power. Rockhold come in, he had his hands down. Bisping hit him perfect with a left. He goes down, he pops back up to his credit, and then Bisping hits him with another left that you couldn't have decided before throwing it where it landed any more perfect. Puts him down. He was in all sorts of trouble. He hits him a couple more times. Referee saves him. Michael Bisping is the UFC middleweight champion of the world. UK has its first UFC champion. That needs to be big in the UFC, in the UK press. The UK press has got to go big on this, and I hope this is the catalyst. We've seen what it did in Ireland once Conor McGregor, even before he was the champion in all honesty. Let's see what the UK press does now. Michael Bisping has got to go on a bit of a press tour, and he's got to really ramp it up. And let's see MMA start getting nearer the back page and not being left with WWE at the very bottom near the racing pages like it always is. This could be the catalyst, and I hope this is the catalyst. And the final bit of news that we've got to talk about is Conor McGregor. And it's still the biggest name in the UFC. And this is the other one that Helwani broke on Saturday night, is that Conor McGregor is booked in. There's been rumours around this for weeks, so it's not the most shocking news. Conor McGregor is booked in to fight Nate Diaz at UFC 202. Boom. There we go. So we can put to bed all those bullshit Mayweather things, and I don't know where this came from, why it came up, and it seemed like everybody was just playing the game about it. Conor McGregor cannot fight Floyd Mayweather in a boxing match. That's going to go about as well as me fighting Floyd Mayweather in a boxing match. Not very well. I actually do think Conor McGregor probably could have lasted the 12 rounds and not got knocked out and stayed on the outside, because Floyd doesn't come at you. He waits, he sets traps, he hits you on the counter. So I think if Conor would have been sensible, kept it at the wide stance, kept out of trouble, avoided getting hit, he's got bigger gloves, he's got a decent defence, he's got very fast reactions, he could have avoided getting knocked out. He would have lost the decision all day long, but he could have avoided getting knocked out. And I think from someone going from MMA into boxing and fighting one of the best all-time fighters and not getting knocked out, we know what Conor's like, and I know that he would try and spin it like, listen, I've come in here, you haven't beat me, you've won a decision against me. He'd call him a coward for not being able to finish him. You know what he'd do. And I think Conor would be able to spin it into him actually, into this being seen as a moral victory of some sort, even though he would absolutely lose the fight. But I think that's what he could do. I think he could do that. Someone suggested as well, I think it was one of my MMA latest writers, someone suggested he'd wait till the last round, he'd keep out of trouble, and then the last round he'd just kick him in the head, knock him out, and he'd go, oh well, I've been disqualified, you might have won the fight, you might have won the boxing match, but I would have won the fight. And I could see that happening too, because Conor, he's not roofed in right, is he, let's face it. So there you go, a quick 5 things there for you, what's happening in the world of MMA at the moment. Please go and subscribe to MMA Latest. We are trying to build that channel up. There could be if 1,000 of you from here now go and check it out, then that's absolutely fantastic. We've got stuff coming out all the time. We've got technical breakdowns from Frank Barker, the first black belt in the Southern Hemisphere over in Melbourne. We've got a couple of fighters that do us weekly diaries that's on there. We're at every single event. We do live coverage. We show you the weigh-ins. We speak to the fighters. It's a great channel, and we just got to get it up there, and we've got to get... It's my job to get more content on there, and that's what I'm trying to do all the time. So I really appreciate anyone that can jib over there. I'll put a link in the description below. MMA Latest on YouTube. It's easy to find. Once again, thank you for watching. Anything you like in the comments, stick it in the comments. Let's start some MMA discussion. The Euro videos hopefully will be out this evening. It'll be Group C and D. Thank you for watching. I'll see you soon.